Have you ever felt like you're completely hijacked by a strong emotion? Like a wave of anger or anxiety that just takes over? Well, today we're going to break down a really powerful mental technique from our source material called Sati. You can think of it as a defense system for your mind, one that's designed to handle those overwhelming feelings before they can get their hooks in you.
All right, let's just jump right in by tackling a huge misconception. When you hear about practices like this, does your mind immediately go to the idea of emptying your thoughts or thinking about nothing? Because, a lot of us have been told that's the ultimate goal. Well, it turns out that's not really it at all. The real power here isn't about deleting or suppressing your feelings. It's actually about something much deeper. It's about fundamentally changing the syntax of your mind. It's like we're going to rewire the very grammar it uses to process your own experiences. So how in the world do we do that? It all starts with this core principle, this little trick we can call the syntax switch. And trust me, this simple shift is an absolute game changer for how you experience things like pain or emotional distress. Okay, just look at this. On the left, that's our default setting, right? I am in pain. Notice how the I and the pain are basically fused together. The pain becomes part of your identity. But now look at the right in what we're calling Sati mode. The thought shifts to there is pain. See that? It's a tiny change in words, but a massive change in meaning. This little trick has a name: De-subjectification. It sounds a bit technical, but all it means is you're taking the I out of the equation. Suddenly, the pain isn't you anymore. It's just an object, an event. It's a piece of data that your system has noticed. It goes from being a personal crisis to just a system notification. Now, this idea of creating distance might seem a little abstract, but this is where it gets really cool. The source material gives us this brilliant analogy from a field you wouldn't expect: computer security. Let's talk about the idea of a mental sandbox. So, in the world of cybersecurity, if your computer finds a suspicious file, it doesn't just let it run wild, right? Of course not. It isolates it in a sandbox. This is a safe, contained space where you can watch what the file does without it being able to harm the main system. Well, Sati, this mental technique, works in exactly the same way for our minds. So let's picture it. A strong feeling suddenly pops up, maybe a flash of irritation or a pang of anxiety. In the original texts, this raw sensation is called Vedana. You can think of this Vedana as a new, unknown program that just tried to launch itself on your mental operating system. Now, instead of letting that irritation run the show and take over everything, Sati immediately steps in. It acts like your mind's antivirus software. It intercepts that feeling and puts it straight into that mental sandbox. It treats it not as your reality, but just as data on a screen that you can calmly observe. And here is where the magic happens. Because that feeling is safely sandboxed, you stop feeding it. You cut off all the stories and the mental chatter, this is so unfair, or why does this always happen to me? That extra fuel, the kindling for the fire, is called upadana. And you can see what happens. When you cut off the upadana, the reactive fire, which is called tanha, has nothing left to burn. It just flickers and fades away all on its own. Okay, this all sounds fantastic in theory, right? But how do we actually do it? How do we build and use this mental sandbox when we're in the middle of a stressful moment? Well, the source material gives us this beautifully simple 3-step algorithm to follow. Think of this as a simple 3-step data labeling process for your own feelings. It's incredibly practical. The steps are 1. Naming, 2. Decomposition, and 3. Observing decay. Let's walk through each one right now. First thing, the moment you feel it, that surge of anger or that knot of anxiety, you simply, and very dryly, just attach a label to it in your head. Just go, anger, anger, or pain, pain. The simple act of naming it instantly makes it an object. It's no longer me. It's that thing over there called anger that I'm now just watching. Now, this next part is absolutely crucial. You don't just stop at the big, scary label like pain. You have to deconstruct it. You need to break the experience down into its tiniest little pieces, almost like you're zooming in on a digital photo until you can see the individual pixels. So instead of battling this one huge monster called pain, you become a detective. You start asking questions. What is this really? Is it a feeling of heat? Is it a kind of vibration? Is there some pressure? Or maybe it's just a tingling sensation. When you break it down like this, you realize there's no single thing called pain. There's just a collection of neutral, physical signals. And suddenly, those raw signals aren't nearly as scary.
And that leads us perfectly into the final step. Once you've named the feeling and broken it down, you just watch it. And what you'll notice every single time is that it's not a solid, permanent thing. It changes, it pulses, it shifts, it fluctuates, and eventually it disappears. This direct experience of its impermanence, what's called anicca, proves to your brain that this feeling isn't a permanent threat. It was just a temporary signal passing through.
So, let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture here. What we're really learning to do is to convert our messy, chaotic, overwhelming feelings into clean, manageable data. The core practice really boils down to this. First, you create this tiny little gap, even just a fraction of a second, between what happens and how you normally react. Second, you use language to label the feeling and turn it into an object. And third, you simply log the data in your mind. A sensation of heat arose, it stayed for a moment, and now it's gone. All without judgment and without reacting. You know, there's an ancient phrase in Pali from the source material that just captures this entire idea so perfectly. It's ditte dittamatum, and it translates simply to, in the seeing, there is only the seen. Don't add a story, don't add an I, just see what is seen. Just feel what is felt. That's it. And so that really leaves us with a final, very practical question to take with you. The next time a strong emotion comes knocking, you have a choice. You can ask yourself, am I going to let this become my state of being, something that defines me in this moment? Or am I going to treat it as data, something to simply be observed? The choice, as you can see, is yours.